Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Nedarim Daf Peitet. We're almost at the end. Please register for the Siyum. Please join a Siyum near you if there is one. And just a quick reminder: on Tuesday morning there will be no Zoom Shiur because we'll be learning that daf at the Siyum Tuesday night. And that's, I guess, what you need to know. Wednesday, starting Nazir. This week's learning is sponsored by Cindy Dalgin for the Yurtzites of Mira and Avram Dalgin, loving in-laws of Cindy and dedicated public servants of the Zionist and Democratic State of Israel. Today's daf is sponsored by Sari Esterman in memory of her father, Moshe ben Yosef HaKohen, on his 11th Yurtzeit. And today's daf is sponsored by Marcia Baum in loving memory of her mother, Helen Baum, Chaya Hana Alter Bat Chana B'Yakuti El Yehuda, on her 7th Yurtzeit. Mom was a lover of learning and Yahadut who instilled those values in her daughters. She is sorely missed. So we're going to get started with the bottom of the Mishna on the previous page. The neder almana grusha yakum aleha. The neder of a widow or a divorcee, there's no way to nullify that, okay? Because once she's married, her father can't nullify it anymore, and she has no husband, obviously, to nullify it. Now, this is quite obvious, so the Mishnah says, Ketzad, what exactly is the new, unique case that this pasuk is teaching us? She says, I will be a nazir after 30 days. When it says in al neder of an almanah grusha, it means even a neder she took, if she took the neder when she was divorced or widowed, and then, but said the neder is only going to take place in another 30 days, meaning, let's say, I'll be a nazir in 30 days. If when the day 30 comes, she's already married, her husband cannot nullify that because it goes by when she took the vow. And that's the first part. Next case. If she took a vow and she was in the domain of her husband, then he can nullify it. Now, what's the case? We're talking about a divorcee or a widow. So what are we referring to? If she said, I'm going to be a nazir after 30 days, if he nullified it when he was married to her, and then it only took effect, though, 30 days later, just the same logic as the first part of the Mishnah, he is what he nullified at the time, even though right now when the neder kicks in, or should theoretically kick in, she's not married, it doesn't matter, he already nullified it from before. So any nullification he does, even if the neder only kicks in later when she's divorced, it doesn't make a difference. He did it at the time they were married, it's fine. So again, both of these indicate that the important moment is the moment you take the vow and not the moment the vow actually kicks into play, right? In a case where you pushed it off to some future date. Another halacha. Nadra bo bayom, this is a different halacha. She takes a vow on that day. Vinit garsha bo bayom, and she gets divorced on the same day. Hichzira bo bayom, but her husband returns, remarries her on that same day. Eino yachol lahafil. He can no longer nullify her vow she made this morning when she was married to him. Why is that? Because once she gets divorced, her father, now this goes back, maybe I should, even before we explain this Mishnah, we should go back and read the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Aleph, which actually the Gemara is going to make reference to when we get to this section in the Gemara. So if you look at Daf Ayin Aleph, going back now, Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph in the Mishnah, it was a case where Nadra v'hi arusa. In our case, she's married. In this case, in Ayin Aleph, she was only betrothed. Nit garsha bo bayom, she got divorced that day after she took the vow. Nit arsa bo bayom, she gets engaged to somebody else. Afilu lemea, could be even 100 different people this happened to. Remember this exaggerated case? Avia u'ba'alaha acharon mefirim nedareha. Her father and the last husband are allowed to nullify her vow from that morning. Why is that? If you remember, and it even says zehaklal, this is the rule. The general rule is like this, the rule of thumb, as we would say. When she was betrothed, her father and her husband were able to nullify her vows. When she gets divorced from betrothal, as opposed to marriage, her father can still nullify her vows because she was never married. It's only once she was married that the father can't. So now the father, in this in-between stage, he can nullify her vow from earlier because the father can always nullify vows from before because That's the father's right. That's the husband who has this unique halacha that he can't nullify previous vows when he marries her. But that's only at marriage. A betrothal, since the father and the husband are together, in the stage in between in that day, only the father could have nullified, but he could nullify. So therefore, when she gets re-betrothed to somebody else, the father together with the husband, the betrothal, the husband who betrothed her, or the fiance, you could say, are allowed to nullify the vow from the morning, because the vow all along was able to be nullified by her father. As the words of the Mishna, she's lo yatsa l'reshut atzma. She didn't go into her own domain, as opposed to our Mishnah, where we're going to see the opposite of the zehaklal. This is the rule in our Mishnah, zehaklal. In our case, she was married to the first guy. She was married to him a second time, but right now we're talking about the first marriage. When she gets divorced from him, since she was married, she doesn't go back to her father's domain. The father can't nullify the vow. So once she's in the middle of that day, nobody can nullify her vows. When she then remarries the first husband, who basically she was in his jurisdiction when she took the vow, it doesn't make a difference. Because as soon as she leaves his domain, she goes into reshut atzma, and nobody can nullify the vows. When she remarries him, we say in habal mefer b'kodmim, he can't go back and do anything from before, because we don't have the father here in the picture to basically bridge that gap. So eventually the Gemara is going to ask, when we get to this section of the Gemara, that why does it say zehaklal there, and why does it say zehaklal here? And that's why it was important to me also to read that Mishnah. Number one, to understand our Mishnah, because when you can compare the two, you understand the case better. And also the Gemara is going to say, in either case, you didn't need zehaklal. Zehaklal is just explaining the case, but it's saying, and here's the general rule, but we already know the general rule, because if you had just said, she took the vow on that day, he divorced her, he remarries her, he can't nullify. Why can't he nullify? Because she already was in her own domain in the middle. So it's true, it's helpful to say it in words, zehaklal, but the Gemara usually assumes that the Mishnah must be adding something here, and they're going to ask basically, what did they add there, and what did they add here? But before we get there, we're going to go back to the first part of our Mishnah. The first part of our Mishnah spoke about that it's clear from our Mishnah that when we talk about hapara, nullifying, it goes by the moment that the woman took the vow, and not the moment that the vow takes effect. So we have two different moments here. The moment she vowed to be a nazir, and it doesn't matter what she vowed, that's just an example, and the moment that the neder starts kicking in. So we already said, which is, let's say in our Mishnah, it's 30 days later. So we made it very clear from our Mishnah that that case goes by, he nullifies it based on the moment she took the vow. And if they're divorced later, doesn't matter, he already nullified it. If they're married later and she wasn't married at the time, he can't nullify it, because it all goes by the moment she took the vow. But now we're going to see the machloket about this. It's a little bit different, and the question is going to be, is this exactly the same thing as our Mishnah? And is there a debate about the case in our Mishnah? Or will both the opinions here agree with the case in our Mishnah? So that's what we're going to get to. But first, let's explain the case. Tanya, in the braita it says, Almanal grusha. So we start off with the widow or divorcee. Shamra, hareini nizira lechisha enaseh. By the way, I think it could be here also a woman who wasn't married at all previously, but she says, I'm going to be a nazir when I get married. Vinisate, and she gets married. So now the question is, when she gets married, can the husband nullify the vow? Based on what we learned in our Mishnah, what will we say? No, because it all goes by the moment she took the vow, and she took the vow, she wasn't married. So Rabbi Yishmael Omer Yafel. Rabbi Yishmael says, no, he can nullify the vow. When she gets married and the neder takes effect, he seems to be disagreeing with our Mishnah, it goes by when the neder takes effect. At that point, she's married, so yes, he can nullify. So the day she gets married basically is the day he can nullify it, unless, of course, he hears about it later. But either way, he can nullify it. Rabbi Akiva Omer Lo Yafel. Why? Because at the time she vowed, she wasn't married. V'simana, and here's the siman for, we're going to have another case, and altogether there's 4 opinions, because in each case there's Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva. Here's the siman, Yilale. What's Yilale? Yud Yafer, he can nullify. Lamed Lo Yafer, he can't nullify. So it's going to be, Rabbi Yishmael said in our first case, Yafer. Rabbi Akiva said Lo Yafer. In the second case, it's going to be the Lo Yafer goes to Rabbi Yishmael and the Yafer goes to Rabbi Akiva. It sounds a little confusing, but it's not so confusing, because the other case is going to be the opposite, and that's why each one's going to say the opposite opinion, because the time of the statement of the neder and the time of it taking effect are going to be the reverse in the next case. In the next case, she's going to be married when she took the vow. She's going to be not married when the vow kicks in. It's going to be the opposite. Eshet ish, a woman who says, a married woman who says, Hareini nizira lecheshe et garesh. If in the event I get divorced, then my neder will kick in and I'll be a nazira. Then what happens? So again, vinit garsha, then she gets divorced. What happens? Rabbi Yishmael, who goes by when it takes effect, will say, when she gets divorced, that's when the neder takes effect. That's when the husband can nullify it. But at that point, he's no longer her husband. So lo yafer. Okay, that's the lamid of yilala, right? Now he's saying the opposite because it's the opposite case. At the time the neder takes effect, they're divorced. Rabbi Akiva omer yafer because it goes by the time the neder was made and she was married at the time. So therefore he can nullify. So first, before we get to how does this relate to our Mishnah, first we're going to explain the basis of both of their opinions here. Amar Rabbi Yishmael, Harei omer, it says in the pasuk, b'neder amana ugrusha. Now, what does he understand by that? Ad sheyehei neder b'shat amanut b'gerushin. The focus is on the vow itself. The vow itself is the vow that takes effect, not on the saying of the vow, the making the statement. It's the vow itself. The vow has to be a vow of a woman who's an almanah or grusha in order for the husband not to be able to nullify it. And therefore, if the neder takes effect when she's divorced, that's when he won't be able to nullify it, but not when the neder was stated. Rabbi Akiva savar harei omer, he focuses on a different pasuk. Kol asher asra al nafsha. It has to do with what she forbade to herself. When does that happen? When she expresses the words in her mouth. So it's when she expresses what's going to be forbidden to her when she's an almanah grusha, then he won't be able to be mefer. But if it was expressed when she was married, he can nullify. Okay, so each one has a different proof. Amar Rav Chisda, Manitim Rabbi Akiva. So Rav Chisda says the obvious, which is our Mishna is Rabbi Akiva. Again, it's very simple the way we're going to read it this way, because Rabbi Akiva holds it all goes by the time she said the words of the neder. It doesn't matter that the neder is going to apply at some future time. It goes by what's her status right now when she says the vow. It's exactly what our Mishnah said. However, Abaye is going to say, okay, this is a classic, first of all, Abaye does this a lot, and also it's just a classic approach, which is to say, no, let's try to read the Mishnah according to both opinions. Abaye amar afilu tema Rabbi Yishmael. There's a difference between the Mishnah and the braita, and Rabbi Yishmael would even agree with our Mishnah. Why? In other words, he'll say, in our case, in the Mishnah, it follows when she says the vow. In the case of the when I get divorced or when I get married, that will follow the fulfillment of the neder. Why is there when the neder actually takes effect? Why is there a difference? So he says the following: Matnitin tal yanafshe biyomi, braita tal yanafshe b'nisim. Our Mishnah depended it on a number of days, meaning her vow was the vow will take effect in X number of days, versus the braita, which said the vow will take effect when some event happens. Either I get divorced or I get married. That's something different. What's the difference? So it doesn't explain this all in words, and it's actually skipping some words because you would expect it to say, in this case, this, and in that case, that, but instead it only gives one approach. It talks about the Mishnah, and it says, Shalmu Yomi velo nitgarsha, Shalmu Yomi velo mitnaspa. The days could pass, in the case of our Mishnah, the Mishnah gave a case where she said, in 30 days, I'll be a nazir, and it happened to be that she got divorced within those 30 days, or she got married within those 30 days. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. When she stands up and says, in 30 days, I'll be a nazirah, it could have very easily been that her status would have remained the same. She would have still been married or still been divorced. Okay, there's no reason to believe when she took the vow that her status would change specifically within those 30 days. And therefore, okay, well, let's talk about the opposite, which is really what's missing here in the Gemara. But when she says, when I get married or when I get divorced, she's discussing a time and saying the neder is going to take effect when I'm in a different status. Right now I'm married. When I get divorced and I no longer have a husband who can nullify my vow, that's when it's going to take effect. Well, then it seems like it's important more when it takes effect because my status will be different as relates to the ability to nullify vows or not. And likewise, the reverse. She says, when I get married, her status will be different when the neder takes effect. So in that case, Rabbi Yishmael says, since she's discussing a change in status, she obviously means for it to be in effect when there's a change in status, and therefore the laws of nullification are going to go by the change of status, by when the neder actually takes effect. But when it has nothing to do with the change of status, and when she said it, it's very likely that she assumed that she wouldn't necessarily have any change of status then we're going to go by what she said, because there's no reason to think that she wanted it to be in effect, that it's true, she was pushing it off to some future date, but assuming that her status would have been the same, and therefore, again, the connection is not 100% clear why this is. The Gemara doesn't express it fully, but it seems that because of that, we'll go by her statement, since there's no change of status necessarily, so we have no reason to believe that we should push off laws of nullification till a later date, okay? But when she specifically says it's going to be when I am married, then we're going to say the hafara goes there. Again, that's Rabbi Yishmael. So Abai explains how Rabbi Yishmael could actually fit in with our Mishnah and distinguish between the two cases. Now we want to go back to the Zehaklal. But before they ask about the Zehaklal here, they're going to first ask about the Zehaklal and Daf Ayin Aleph. And they're basically putting these two Mishnayot together, which is why I wanted to teach them together and say these both are kind of units, right? They're both the same kind of thing, a different type of case, but the same situation where the woman was married or betrothed to someone, changed status in the middle, then either betrothed to someone else or remarried her first husband. And the law is the opposite. So the question is, why did you have to give us this line of Zehaklal? This is the rule. Zehaklal de katane gabe na'ara murasa, when it comes to a betrothed woman, when it says Zehaklal, the assumption is it's coming to include a case. La'atuye halacha av im shluchei habal. It's to include a case where she's betrothed, okay, but she's on her way to her wedding. She's on her way moving to her husband's house. We've seen this before. So if the father takes her with the messengers of the husband, okay, so we have this procession. We have the father walking with the daughter, the messengers of the husband come and start walking with them, but they all walk together and the father stays with her. So if that's the case, or the fathers sent messengers to take his daughter to meet up with the shluchim of the husband's messengers. And again, his messengers, which are basically considered like the father, are still walking with her and they don't leave her yet. While that's happening, she's still in her father's domain because her father still is with her. Okay? So that's what it's coming to say. She's still considered, the father can still nullify her vows. In that case, both the father and the husband are allowed to nullify her vows. But in our chapter, right, they're calling it by chapter name, which is interesting. The Gemara calls them by chapter names. So in Elu Nidarim, in our chapter, where it says Zehaklal, and here it comes to say, as soon as she leaves her father's domain, right, he can no longer, not the husband, right? The husband can't go back and nullify vows, even if he was the first husband in that same day. He still can't nullify those vows anymore because we have this principle, Ein habal mefer b'kodmim, when you marry, the husband has no more rights to undo vows from earlier. So what's that coming to include? The next stage, it's to tell you, even if she's not yet married, but the father passes off the daughter to the shluchei habal, to the messengers of the husband. Or he sent messengers and they passed her off to the messengers of the husband. Already at that stage, the father loses his rights to nullify her vows. Once the father loses his rights to nullify her vows, he was again bridging that gap between the old and the new, since he could always nullify things from before, because he was always her father. Well, now at this point, the new husband cannot nullify her vows from before. Okay, so that's the unique halacha taught here. Now we get to a new Mishnah. What this Mishnah is doing is an interesting question. The Mishnah starts off, Tesha na'arot nidrehem kayami. There's 9 types of na'arot, okay, which they're not really na'arot. They're also could be bogeret. We're going to see in a minute. Let's just remind us what those are. Tana is under the age of 12 and 2 simanim, 2 pubic hairs, signs of maturity. Na'ara is those next 6 months from when she hits maturity. after those 6 months are over, she becomes a bogeret. You might remember that we said once she's a bogeret, the father no longer has rights to nullify her vows. So now we're going to talk about 9 cases where the father doesn't have any rights to nullify the daughter's vows anymore. So really, we're going to see at the end in the Gemara that it really comes down to 3 things, which is number 1, bogeret. If she's already at the age of a bogeret, the father can no longer nullify. 2, if she was married, we saw this just before, once she leaves her father's domain, right, meaning she gets married to someone, she never goes back to her father's domain anymore. And number 3, if her father dies, obviously he can't nullify her vows, but the point is those vows will not be nullified anymore because her father is dead. Right? No, basically meaning nobody else takes the place of the father. The brother who might kick in and do certain things to the father can't nullify her vow. So why does it say 9 when it's really 3? So the Yerushalmi, they quote Rabbi Yochanan. It's a cute line. I wanted to read it. Rabbi Yochanan shtayim him. He actually says it's really 2. I'm not sure which 2 he's referring to. I assume he means that she gets married, and because the father's dead, obviously the father's dead, but I'm not sure. But he says really it's 2. V'lama taninan tesha. Why does it say 9? B'shvil l'chadeda to talmidim. Okay, I wanted you to put this perspective on before you read the Mishnah, because it's going to seem a little bit, why are we giving all these cases? There's really no unique halacha in any of them, and it's quite obvious. But it's to sharpen the students, okay? They wanted sometimes, and this is, Safrai said it in Mishna Israel in good language, he said, sometimes the Mishnah, don't take the Mishnah so literally like the Torah, that the Torah must be teaching us something new and unique in every pasuk. The Mishnah sometimes just does things to kind of strengthen, sharpen the minds of the students and say something in a particular way, even though you're not really learning anything majorly new from. So here go the 9. Bogeret v'hi yitoma. Most of the commentaries think yitoma means yitoma b'chayei ha'av. This is what we call an orphan in the lifetime of the father. That means, we actually saw this with Miun, if you remember, that means once she's already married, the father no longer has rights to her, right? Because she's already been married. So she leaves the domain of her father. Even if she's living in her father's house, she's left his domain in terms of certain responsibilities. So for example, he can't betroth her on a Torah level anymore. That's when Miyun kicks in also. It's one of the reasons why Miyun kicks in, because he no longer can marry her off. If the first marriage didn't go, right, meaning she got divorced or he died, the father doesn't have rights to betroth her on a Torah level like he did before, even if she's still underage. Okay, in this case, she's got 2 reasons why he can't. So number 1, he can't nullify her vows anymore because she's the Yitoma b'chayei because she was already married to someone. Also, she was a bogeret. So either way, right, she's already beyond the age where he can nullify her vows. Na'ara ubagra v'hi yitoma. So again, there's different ways to read this all, but we like the Ran. She was the na'ara when she made the vow. But then she became a bogeret, and she was married in the middle and divorced or widowed. And that's what it means, v'hi yitoma. So at the time she took the vow, she was a na'ara, but he obviously didn't hear about it. He only hears about it now, but she's number 1, already been married and divorced. And number 2, she's now a bogeret. She wasn't a bogeret when she took the vow, but she's now a bogeret. So obviously then also, right, even though you might have said, well, she took the vow and she was a na'ara, and before she was married, but it doesn't matter. Since now when he hears about it, she's already, for those 2 reasons, out of his domain. Na'ara shelo bagra v'hi yitoma. Or if she was only a na'ara and she got married and divorced, right? She took the vow when she was a na'ara, she got married and divorced, and now she goes, right? She's no longer married. So she's the yitoma b'chayei ha'av, but she's not a bogeret, but doesn't matter because again, you only need one of them to remove the father from the picture. Since she was already married, he can no longer nullify her vow. Bogeret umeit avia. Those were 3 where she's a yitoma b'chayei ha'av, either a bogeret, a na'ara, or a combo. She took it when she was a na'ara, turned into a bogeret. Now we get to the next one. She's bogeret when she took the vow, but her father dies. So once he dies, obviously he can't nullify it again. Neither can anyone else step in his place. Na'ara bogeret umeit avia. Again, the other case like last time. She was a na'ara when she took the vow, and her father was still alive. She's now a bogeret, and also her father is dead now. So besides, she's got a bogeret. She became a bogeret in the meantime, and her father's no longer alive. Na'ara shelo bagra umeit avia. We have a woman who is of age where the father theoretically could have nullified her vow, but he died. So again, he can't nullify her vow, neither can anyone else. Next three cases. The commentary is kind of split into threes. Na'ara shemet avia. She was a na'ara, and then her father died when she was still a na'ara. Umi shemet avia bagra. And once he died, in the meantime, she got older. Okay, so right now she's standing in front of us. She's a bogeret, but he actually died when she was a na'ara. Still, it doesn't make a difference. Bogeret vavia kayam. She's already a bogeret, but her father's still alive. So she's only got bogeret, but still that's enough to say the father can't nullify. Na'ara bogeret vavia kayam. Okay, she's a na'ara. Then she got older, and her father's still alive, but at the time, right now, he hears about the vows. She's already a bogeret, so he can't nullify her vow. So those are the 9 cases. Sounds kind of complicated, but they're really kind of straightforward. Again, the 3 things you have to remember: bogeret, he dies, or she's yitoma b'chaya'av, she was married to someone in the meantime. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda adds something additional. Most people have the girsa ve'adayin hi na'ara. Different ways of reading this. I'm going to read it one way so as not to confuse you too much. According to my reading, which is not my reading, but other people's readings, Rabbi Yehuda is adding on to Tanakama. Okay, it's the reading that matches the version of our text for the most part, other than this vav that's missing. And that Rabbi Yehuda, really, you'll see the Gemara in the continuation. It can only be read according to this version. Some people switch the word Rabbi Yehuda with Rabbi Meir and think that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with the Mishnah, but I'm not going to read it that way. Rabbi Yehuda here is adding to Tanakama and says, I have another case to add. In addition to what you said, I would also add, not only if she's a na'ara, notice it started with na'arot, even if she's a minor, underage, and she was married, divorced, or widowed, Chazra etzlo, she goes back to her father's house and lives there with him. Ve'adayin hi na'ara. Okay, if you add the vav, it means, and she's still treated like a na'ara, meaning she actually, even though she's a minor, totally a minor, she's still treated like a na'ara, that he cannot annul her vows because she was married in the meantime, even though she's still a ketana. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, sticking with this girsa, he says, Do divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. Now, it's not really true. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda only comes in at the end. But again, if you hold, like I said, which is the Rabbi Yehuda is adding to Tanakama, basically they don't really know who the Tana of the Mishnah is, but they say at least we know that Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Tanakama because he's only adding to him. So whatever was said in the Mishnah really matches Rabbi Yehuda, even though the one who disagrees with him about not adding the Ketana must be somebody else, but still it's Rabbi Yehuda. אבל חכמים אומרים, 3 נערות נדריהם קיימות, בוגרת, יתומה ותאומה בחיי האב. Again, according to this reading, this is just semantics. The rabbis categorized it into 3. They didn't say 9. Okay, the one who says 9 and then added this 10th was Rabbi Akiva. It was Rabbi Yehuda. But other people counted it differently and counted it as 3. Okay, this reading doesn't really have anything major to say about this. It's really just, do you call it 9? Do you call it 3? In the end, the bottom line is really one and the same. Okay, that it's really, right, these are the 3 criteria that are important. Okay, even though you could say it as 3, you could say it as 9. New Mishnah. Again, like I said, there are different ways to read this. I'm not going to get into them right now. This really goes back to 2 Mishnayot ago, where we started today, which is we have a woman who takes a vow upon condition, right? We had in 30 days, or we had if I get married, if I get divorced. This is a different kind of condition, but this is, I will not do anything for my father or your father, she says to her husband, if osani al picha, if I let you benefit from my work, then your father or my father will be forbidden. So the question is this inui nefesh? Is this, right? So we said all this Mishnah to Rabbi Yossi, you wouldn't call this inui nefesh if you remember, but what would we call this? Benu bencha. Why is benu bencha, right? Between her and her husband? Because she's basically either, right? The condition has to do with him because she's saying, I won't give you any benefit from my work. So basically, either she doesn't fulfill the condition. Let's try. She fulfills the condition. She doesn't let him, she doesn't fulfill the condition. She doesn't fulfill the condition. She's basically saying, you can't benefit from me.
then she's not forbidden to her father or his father, but he can't benefit from her. That's beini lebeino. Sorry, I'm saying it wrong. That's between the two of them. Beina lebeino. If she doesn't forbid him from benefit, right? If she what did I say? She doesn't let him benefit, right? She doesn't let him benefit, that's between the two of them. If she does let him benefit, which wouldn't then interfere with their relationship, it's still going to be allowed for him to be made for it. Why? Because what will happen? The father or the father-in-law will be forbidden on his account. And some of the commentaries say, therefore, it's really he's going to get blamed for it. It's because he's benefiting that they're not allowed to benefit. So they'll come and complain to him, and that will cause tension between them. That's one way of reading it. The Ran explains it a little bit differently, but we'll stick with that explanation for now. The second case is, so both of these cases, he's going to be able to nullify, because in this case, it's going to affect him, right? Because and more so, the truth is, the Ran says it's because the t'nai, the condition, which is the thing that's going to happen first, has to do with him benefiting from her. So it's beini ubencha. The second case is the reverse. So the Ran's going to have to struggle a little more to get the connection. If I do work for my father or your father, or I allow them to benefit from my work, then I will not be able to benefit. You will not be able to benefit from me, she says to her husband. Now, in this case, theoretically, you could say this will never be beini ubeino, because she can just refrain from having the benefit, and the neder will never click into place. So again, if you go with the approach that, well, if she doesn't let them benefit, it affects her husband because they'll complain to him, it's all because of you, and then that will cause tension. That's one way to read it. The Ran says it very interestingly. The Ran says there's no way that she can live her life without having either her father or her father-in-law benefiting, without him benefiting from her. In other words, you can't live your life with your in-laws or your parents never having any benefit from you. So the likelihood of this neder kicking into place is so great that it eventually will then become beini ubeino, beina ubeino. So between the two of them. So therefore, he can nullify the vow. So even though the neder hasn't, and the real chiddush here is, even though the neder hasn't come into place, he can still already nullify it. Okay, again, we saw the Ran and other reasons as well. It's not 100% clear. Is this both of them beino lebeina, or is it just that the second one, right, is going to necessarily happen and then it will become beino lebeina, even though right now it's not? But now the Gemara brings a braita that shows that there's actually a machloket about this. Not everybody agrees. Tanya, the braita says, she'eni nehenei la'abu la'avicha. This is the first case. I won't benefit, right? Your father or my father won't benefit from me. Im ani oseh lepicha. If I, right, so the condition now is all about him and her. If I let you benefit from my work. Rabbi Natan omer lo yafel. Rabbi Natan says he can't nullify this vow. Why? Because the vow hasn't taken effect. You can't nullify a vow that hasn't taken effect yet. Chachamim omrim yafer. The rabbis say no, he can still nullify it because we don't want it to take effect, right? It will majorly affect him if it takes effect, and therefore he can. To which the Gemara starts off with the story. We're only going to see the beginning part today. But the first thing to take strong note of, this story has to do with hatarat nedarim and not hafarat nedarim. Okay, remember, those are two different things. Hafara is what a husband does to the wife, or a man does to his daughter. That's nullifying a vow, and that's what their machloket is about. The question is going to be, is it the same machloket also by hatarat nedarim? If someone, can you be matir a neder that hasn't actually happened yet? You said a condition, the condition hasn't been met yet, so the neder isn't in effect. Can you go and undo it before the neder comes into effect? So here's a good example. Ha'u gavra, there was a guy. He forbade everyone in the world from benefiting from him. He forbade himself from benefiting from everyone in the world. My mistake. Forbade benefit from the whole world. There's actually a debate about what this means. Some people say it means he forbade any kind of benefit from anybody. Some people say he forbade a specific type of benefit, like I don't know, I won't get benefit from you relating to fruit, something particular. Okay, there's a debate about a whole bunch of debates within this of how to understand all sorts of details of the story. In any case, he did something pretty broad-reaching that affected everybody in the world, his benefit from everyone in the world.
He says, if I get married to a woman before I learn Torah, I have to learn Torah and learn halacha, okay? If I marry a woman before I do that, he obviously, was motivated. He wanted to get married, but he also wanted to learn. So he said, right, this whole Mishna and Kiddushin, right? Is there an order? You have to learn Torah first and then get married, or get married and then learn Torah. He basically wanted to learn Torah first. He said, if I do the reverse, then I'll be forbidden from everyone in the world. What happened? Well, here already we're into debates what exactly happened, which is actually interesting, right? Begapa v'tuvalia. Okay, these are not the most common Aramaic words, and therefore the commentaries debate what exactly they are and what the meaning of what they are. So the Mefaresh, which is written as if it's Rashi, and the Ran both say it's the same idea, but they have a very different way of understanding it. The Ran says is b'maklo tarmilo, with his staff and cloak, he went, which means shishtadel b'kol kocho lamod. He went with his staff and cloak to go learn. But, some people just don't have what it takes to learn. And he just wasn't successful in his learning. He tried as hard as he possibly could. That's what it means, begapa v'tuvalia. Rashi says the same thing, except that or again, miyuchas Rashi, not really Rashi, but he says the gapa is a ladder that you climb the ilan, the tree. The tuvalia is like a picker that you pick the things with, meaning he took all his tools, he took what he could, but in the end, he explains it the same way. In the end, it was not successful. However, there's two other interesting explanations I wanted to bring. One is the Aruch, who basically has the same gist, but a little bit different. He explains it literally. He actually went and worked in the fields. Why did he work in the fields? Because he wanted to bring in fruits to give to the rabbis so that they would teach him. Okay, that it was in order to enable his teaching, but still it wasn't successful. So all three of them really say the same idea. They're interpreting it all differently, whether it's literal, actual, what it means. Okay, but the idea is he tried his best. However, Tosfot says, is it Tosfot? Yeah, Tosfot says, it's klisha movilim lo bo perot, v'lo haya yachol igav lilmod. He went to work instead. He had to work to make a living, and he didn't actually go to learn Torah. Okay, now again, you could say he had no choice. He needed the money, but in the end, he didn't even try. Okay, so there's maybe a bit of a difference about whether he tried or didn't try. In any case, it doesn't seem to affect the bottom line of the story. So lo imse lemidna, he didn't succeed in learning. So now what's the issue? He wants to go get married, but he made this vow. He doesn't want to go get married. So he goes ata Rav Acha bar Rav Huna. He's in front of Rav Acha bar Rav Huna. Rav Acha bar Rav Huna says to him, v'shabshe. Okay, shabshe is he tricked him. What does it mean he tricked him? Well, he said, don't worry, go get married and it'll all be fine. Okay? Even though, right, he made him feel like your neder's not going to kick in. Okay, because maybe if you go with the approach, you tried hard, okay, you tried, you can go get married anyway. Now, why did he do this? Because the neder was going to kick in. Well, insiv itata. So he went and got married, this guy. I'm going to read the next 6 words, okay, and then we'll stop for today. After I explain you a few different ways of reading this, it's kind of funny. Vishar ketina, he throws tar at him or like cement, like something disgusting. I don't know if okay, we'll see what this is in a minute. And he brings it before Rav Chisda to do hatarat nedarim, okay, to undo the vow. Now, what do you see here? What you see here is he wanted the vow to kick in so that it could be dissolved. Because without, this is the whole thing of what Rabbi Natan said, right? Rabbi Natan said, if you don't take the vow, then you can't undo the vow. Now, that was hapara, this is hatara. So we're going to see, right? Is it because he held like Rabbi Natan and he held that what's true for there is true for there? This is all going to come up in tomorrow's daf. But the question is, why did he throw all this dirt on him and get him really filthy? So there's 3 interesting interpretations. Again, like I said, there's probably more. But again, the story is hard to understand. So the Mefaresh by Rashi, right? It says Rashi, Tach panav betit. He threw this on his face to cover his face so that Rav Chisda wouldn't recognize him, because he was worried that if Rav Chisda recognized him, he never would undo the vow, because he said, oh, I know this guy. He took a silly vow. It's his problem. I'm not undoing this vow. Okay, that's one possibility. The Ran says he wanted him to immediately need people, which is the launderer. He couldn't launder something that by himself, and he forbade himself to get benefit. So as soon as the neder kicked in, he wanted him to immediately go and get it undone. So he created a situation where he would need people and then go to the rabbi and say, well, can I benefit from people? And then he would get the vow annulled immediately before anything worse would happen, and he'd actually benefit from people and go against his vow. So he created a scenario where he would need people. That's the second interpretation. A third interpretation is Tosafot, which is kind of, I would say, the funnier explanation, which is, I don't know, funnier or maybe embarrassing, which is if he can't benefit at all from people, he obviously takes this to the extreme, then he can't even wear clothing. So he had to take off all his clothing, and then he threw the dirt on him to cover his body so he wouldn't be naked. Interesting interpretation. We'll leave the story at this, and we'll see the next line is very interesting. Rav is going to say what a brilliant guy Rav Acha, Bered Rav Huna was, and then we're going to see why he thought he was so brilliant, why he did what he did. We're going to see two different interpretations about why he insisted the neder happen in order to then go and undo it, and we'll see how they understand this case. That's it for today. Wishing everyone a great day. We are really almost there. So tomorrow, class as usual. And as I said, Tuesday morning, there will not be class. Tuesday night, Ezrat Hashem will have a siyum on Zoom. Like I said, there's siyums going on in different places as well. So pay attention to right. If you're in Israel, everything's on the Hebrew side of the website, all the registration there. If it's abroad, then check your local WhatsApp group, something's going on. And Tuesday night, the shiur will go up of the last stuff. Okay, and again, the intros will go up soon. The intros to the Masechtot, we'll be sending them out hopefully today or tomorrow. Gita's introduction and Yelet Lipson's introduction, so that will all go up soon. And wishing everyone a great week and a great day.